You forgot the first rule of remakes, Jill. Don't fuck with the original.
Hey everybody, welcome to Don't F with the Original.
With Nicholas, I'm the gaming correspondent for Idiomatic.
And I am Dimitri, editor-in-chief of Idiomatic and movie critic. And today we're talking sequels, the mechanics of sequels. Alright, let's get to the discussion proper. Can you think of an example of sequels that are better than the original?
Oh, I have a few I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
Aliens. I like better than the original one. They're two different genres. Aliens is more action, whereas Alien is more of a horror thing. But I liked Aliens a lot more. I'm not a huge fan of horror. I thought X2 was better than the original X-Men because the character's already established, like we mentioned, so you can go directly into the action, and the action was a lot better. Terminator 2, I enjoyed a lot more. The action was so much better than Terminator. Terminator 2 put the action like one notch above every other movie of that time, so it was great.
Yeah, I agree. Well, with the case of Terminator 2, it's actually because they're both James Cameron, Aliens, and Terminator 2.
Yeah.
And they both do the same thing, where Terminator 1 is actually more of a horror film when you stop and think about it. I mean, it's not classified as one ever, but if you look at the tropes, it's a silent killer monster that's out of this world that hunts this woman down all the way to the end until she finds a way to kill him.
That's true. That is true. I didn't think about it that way.
And when he made the sequel, he turned it into some real action science fiction tropes, which he did with Aliens as well.
What about you? Any sequels you're thinking?
Well, I'm with you. X2 was one of the ones in my list right away, you know. And Terminator 2 is one of my favorite movies, so absolutely. The thing I've noticed, though, is like superhero movies, the sequel, like the first sequel, not the other ones, they're always the best one. And I think it's because they're, like you said, the characters are already introduced. You don't have to sort of tangle with the origin story.
Yeah.
Spider-Man is a great example of a movie that was bogged down by its origin story. In the sense of, you could have had a really great movie with just the origin story, but it would have been too quiet for a blockbuster. You need a flashy villain. Or it could have been a really good movie, just Spider-Man versus the Green Goblin, but you needed to introduce the character to the audience. So you sort of have two movies that don't really belong together, sort of meshed into one, sort of like a grindhouse movie. You know? It's like there's a missing reel in the Green Goblin story, definitely.
Yeah.
and because of that, the movie feels very disparate, and you're like, what's that?
That's true.
As opposed to Spider-Man 2, where, you don't have to, go through the motions of who Spider-Man is, and you can actually just go through, like, that's what's going on in Peter Parker's life, and here's the Dr. Octopus, and the two things tie together really neatly, and it's awesome.
That's true. Superman as well. Dark Knight.
Oh, yeah.
You're superhero. You just banged the nail on the head there.
Ironically, by the time you reach the third sequel, though, it's always terrible.
Yes!
Well, the second sequel, I should say. The third movie.
Yeah.
And again, I think you can see the reason why, though. In the case of superhero movies specifically, I'm getting off topic just a little bit, but in the case of superhero movies, the first one is bogged down by the origin. Then the second one gets it right, and everybody goes crazy for it. And unfortunately, that's when the producers start paying attention and going, oh, there's a large fan base for this. Okay, we need to please the fans. What do fans like? And unfortunately, the superhero movies are based on comics that have been around for between 50 and 30 years.
Yeah.
So you have these producers going through, oh, well, fans like this, fans like this, fans like that. Put it all in the next movie. And it's like 30 years of history. Yeah. And so every third movie has the same problem, where it's just crammed with crap that just doesn't fit.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's made by producers instead of directors. And I always feel that there's a certain degree of hypocrisy. Unfortunately, the other guys aren't there because they would have said it. Whenever it goes like, oh, I like it better when people present an original story. Why can't Hollywood be creative? And I mean, I'm sort of making fun of the fellow panelists, but let's be honest. That's an opinion that the general public really has a lot of times. You find it on the internet all the time. It's just a general opinion, and I feel there's something a little bit hypocritical about that, because just because you're using the same characters doesn't mean you're not being creative.
Yeah.
You
can have a completely original story with, you're just reusing the characters, whereas you can use you can have a completely different movies, and it's just some recycled things. Oh, I've seen this before. I mean, I'm not saying this is a bad example, but like the Robin Hood movie that came out, and they recycled Saving Private Ryan in it for some, it was completely ridiculous. I mean, recycling ideas in other movies, and you think it's going to be original, but it's not. It's just crazy.
Oh yeah, Gladiator is the first act of Ben-Hur,
Yeah.
We're totally bagging on Russell Crowe here, but and you can't tell me that The Dark Knight has anything to do with Batman Begins. One is a progression of the other. They take place in the same universe with the same characters, but none of the themes are being repeated there.
Yeah.
And it's hypocritical because so many people say that. Like you ask the average Joe, or Tom or Bill. It doesn't really matter what their names are. You just ask a person, and they'll tell you that thing. Oh, I like better original stories. And it's like, if everybody felt that way, why is it that the box office gross for a sequel are not measured the same way as for an original movie? Because sequels always make almost twice as much every time. That's because more people go to see sequels. So people going like, oh, I like better original stories. It's like, most of you must be full of crap.
Yeah.
Or
they don't realize it. I like original stories, except for the characters I like, and I'm going to go see what's happening to them. But, I'm not going to see a sequel of characters I don't care for. I'm guessing that's what they're thinking.
Yeah, maybe.
If you're not a superhero fan, you're not going to go see sequels of superhero movies. But if you really like, for example, Riggs and Murtaugh, and, they come up with Lethal Weapon 5, you're going to go and see it, but you're not realizing what you're doing.
Yeah.
Although their Lethal Weapon 5 is never going to happen, so... Bad example.
That would be hilarious, though. This would be like, oh man, I'm too old for this sheep. and everybody around them goes like, yes, you are! Please retire! Anyway, let's get into the history of the sequels a little bit. A little bit of history, a little bit of information, trivia, so that you don't feel like you're just listening to two guys just shooting the poop.
Yep.
We got information to lay down on you.
Yeah. Information is power, so more power to you, listeners.
Exactly. I was trying to do research to sort of find out which was the first sequel ever made, and it occurred to me when I was doing it halfway through. I was Googling it, and before I even clicked on the first, wiki answer or whatever, I was like, wait a minute. That's going to be impossible to define because, first of all, sequels occurred before cinema. Obviously books.
Like the New Testament is a sequel to the Old Testament.
Exactly. And of course, in later literature, I guess I should say.
Yeah.
Alexandre Dumas. The Three Musketeers stuff. He's made a book series out of those.
Yeah.
So serialization happened long before cinema. And even when cinema happened, the weird thing is, the first thing that really came out in cinema were, there was the large feature and there was a movie short beforehand.
Yeah.
And the movie short beforehand, the first thing they came up with to get people to come back to theaters was a serial, where it was a continued story. So trying to find the first cinematic sequel was kind of hard because you're like, well, okay, officially the official answer that I managed to find, or at least the official answer to which I agreed with, was Fall of the Nation in 1916, which is a sequel of Birth of the Nation.
Okay.
The movie about the Ku Klux Klan saving America from the Blackies.
Interesting.
That's actually what Birth of a Nation is about. But, when I took that answer, but you read on a website and everybody was pointing out, I was like, yeah, but there were Sherlock Holmes before and there were Three Stooges before. It's like, yeah, there's serialization happened before. But I chose it because it's interesting, because Birth of a Nation is often considered the first American blockbuster. Before the blockbuster term was properly coined and created with Spielberg. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But, and yeah, it's thoroughly racist movie, but so I found it fitting that the first sequel would be a sequel to an actual blockbuster, because sequels often are generated to make money, And the thing about it too is that Thomas Dixon Jr., who wrote the book Birth of a Nation, didn't get a penny out of D.W. Griffith's movie Birth of a Nation.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, Hollywood back then was actually pretty similar to Hollywood now, where they screw over a lot of people. Not that I feel bad, seeing as, he wrote Birth of a Nation. the movie about the Ku Klux Klan saving the world from America from black people. But he was pretty angry, so he decided to make a movie himself called Fall of the Nation, where he would, bank on that birth of a nation. And so I think it's the first sequel that was created in the spirit of a sequel. Whereas, like, I want money from the previous film,
Yeah. I guess so.
So he gets that honor, and he also gets the honor to be a thoroughly racist person. And, you can say what you will about, like, oh, well, it's the times, 1916. No, even by 1916 standards, he was a racist.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that, we haven't evolved since then, but he was still a racist. Now, other trivia, it will have to wait all the way to 1974 with Godfather Part 2 until we had the first sequel named Part 2.
Yeah, I guess beforehand they were more subtle with the sequeling.
Yeah, well, they work more creative, The Mummy Returns, or Bride of Frankenstein, you see the idea here. I could go on for days. Or in the case of James Bond, where it's just like a completely random title every time.
Yeah.
So, in other words, Francis Ford Coppola's masterpiece, The Godfather Part 2, has the honor of being the first sequel to be that lazy about its naming.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, whatever you can say about Francis Ford Coppola's movie career, and he'll be remembered for many masterpieces, he will also be remembered for the guy who went like, good enough when he read the title.
Yeah. Well, I guess The Godfather was such a big success, he didn't want to come up with something completely different. He wanted people to, this is the sequel. Don't make any mistake about it. This is the sequel. So he just went Part 2.
I suppose so. I suppose it might have been weird as, like, The Godfather Returns. Or actually, you could have gone the Aliens way, where The Godfathers. Because they actually explore two storylines in The Godfather Part 2. Marco Corleone and his fathers.
But so many people don't even know that Alien and Aliens are, it's like Aliens, and then you talk about Alien, what's Alien? So, I mean, maybe that would have been a mess there, too.
And don't get me started on the naming scheme of Rambo. But true sequelization, I think, really appeared with the appearance of the official blockbuster, and that's George Lucas and Steven Spielberg. Again, two visionary creators in the field of cinema who will be remembered for creating the blockbuster and the money-making machine that will lead to a lot of crap later on.
Yes.
But Jaws, of course, the first official blockbuster movie, was immediately followed 2 years after with Star Wars, which is arguably the first, mega franchise created in the movies. And, like, from this point on, I think that's when Hollywood producers went like, oh my god, we can, like, just add numbers to those over and over again and people will keep coming back!
To be fair, Star Wars, they just didn't add numbers. They came up with different titles.
That is true. In fact, their numbers were really confusing.
Yes.
Because another thing that younger viewers might not know is that the original Star Wars, when it came out, was not Episode 4. The Episode 4 chapter title doesn't appear anywhere in the original theatrical release. I think in VHS he added it.
Yeah.
But in theatrical release, it was just like, it was not Chapter 4 at all. It was just
Star Wars.
Yeah. So, imagine the confusion of people who didn't necessarily rent the VHS afterwards when they went like, oh, Empire Strikes Back, yeah! Star Wars Part 2, it's like The Godfather, but with Star Wars in it.
Yeah.
And then it went like, Episode 5?
Oh my god, I missed 3 movies.
I know I missed a Christmas special, but what were the other 3 I missed? So, from that point on, Sequel City, craziness rounds, and everybody knows to put Part 2 or a little title under it to make you know that it's the same franchise, and people will flock to it even though it's absolute crap. And that leads us to a number of different types of sequels, because as the sequel was created proper, so is the discipline of creating a sequel. So we got several types here. We got the straight sequel, you know what I mean, same character, new adventures, Die Hard, etc.
Yeah, those are fun. If you like the characters, just it's the same character, different adventure. I have no problem with those. If I like the character, I'm going to go watch it.
Yeah, I think it's probably the best sort of sequel.
Yeah.
Because usually when you're watching a sequel, it's because you like the characters, you want to see them again. It's not necessarily because like, oh, that adventure was awesome. I'd love to see it again. It's like, buy the DVD.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's a formula that doesn't necessarily work with one specific genre, which is horror. Because obviously, if you make the same character return, it sort of breaks the tension of, is he gonna die? It's like, no.
That's true.
And which is why the horror sequels tend to follow a different pattern, which is the same adventure, new characters. By which I mean, like, Jason in the woods will kill kids. Jason Part 2, certain types of kids. Friday the 13th Part 3, different types of kids, same murders. Part 4, different types of kids, same murder, and so on, and so on, and so on.
Those actually get tiresome for me, because I'd rather the action be different than the actors. So, okay, it's good that, he kills kids maybe different ways, but he's still killing kids, and it's the same exact thing. I know it's horror, and I can't complain too much about that, because that's what horror films are. That's why probably I'm not a big fan of horror movies. But I don't kind of like those sequels. I'm going to watch maybe one, and then, okay, I've seen the whole series.
Yeah, I think the horror sequels, they are stuck with that formula with sequels, and the trick to them to be creative is to sort of play on different themes. Like, I'm not a big fan of the Jason series, and I will give the producers credit for always trying to do something different. Jason in space, Jason versus a psychic. Like, I'm not even making fun of the series. That actually happens in the series. They are trying at least, but like Halloween don't even try. But I think for me, like a series of sequel that actually was successful for me, up to, well, the later ones near the end of that run there were a little bit stupid. But Nightmare on Elm Street. What they did is, instead of just bringing in new kids, is that they changed the metaphors, where the movies and the symbols in the movie and the themes in the movies communicate a different lesson, if you will. Okay. Where the first one is all about, like, you gotta stay awake in life, and you gotta be alert. Like, if you're in denial, that's when you're gonna die. Okay. And that's why, the guy kills you in your sleep. If you're not in your dreams, if you're not facing reality and you're living a dream instead, he kills you.
All right.
And then the second one uses, Freddy's same powers, but to communicate a different idea, which is all about, sexual repression. And then suddenly the Freddy monster represented sexual repression, and that makes the movie fresh. That means it's not redundant.
Okay.
I think that's the only way to approach that, because otherwise it's, like you said, it's just, he kills them a different way, but he still kills them at the end of the day, whatever.
Yeah.
Since we're talking about the horror genre, we've got to mention the standalone sequel, and that's same theme, different universe. I'm thinking of again. In the horror series, it's pretty prevalent. So you'll have something like Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, all the Romero Dead movies. They don't take, well, except the last two ones, they don't actually take place in the same universe, but they're all dealing with zombies, so they're part of the same series.
That seems like just like trying to get money, because if it's not a sequel, why make it a sequel?
In fairness, though, I see the reasoning in terms of marketing as well, not just in terms of making money, but in terms of gauging your audience properly, in the sense of a Cinderella story and its sequel, Another Cinderella Story. Yeah. Just by looking at the title, Another Cinderella Story, okay, I'm gonna get this type of story. If that interests me, I can rent the movie. If that doesn't interest me, I can stay away. Okay. That does inform your audience as to what your movie is.
Yeah, but, I guess it does. It's just, you for example, you have, Push, which is about kind of superheroes. You don't, Push 2 Kick-Ass. That would have been ridiculous, It's about superheroes too, completely different. It would not make sense to me as a sequel. Okay, they both deal with superheroes, but they should not be together. And, why make them a sequel, really?
Well, actually, that leads us to the other type, which is the really bad one. It's the cash-in sequel, where it's a movie script that was written for a completely different franchise that's retrofitted to fit into the franchise. People will make fun of Troll 2 for that. Like, Troll 2 doesn't even have trolls in it, it's goblins. Wow. But it was just retroactively called Troll 2 because, the creatures sort of look the same, and if you call it Troll 2, more people will see it,
Yeah. Often those are the death of the series, though.
I think you'd be surprised, because Die Hard actually has a number of sequels that were written that way. It seems the producers of Die Hard like doing things that way. Like, I don't know if you heard of the movie Tears from the Sun.
Yeah.
That was actually going to be retrofitted as a Die Hard movie.
I guess the third one killed the franchise, though, for a while, so they said, no, there's no point doing that.
It was going to be Die Hard in the Jungle.
Wow. What does John McClane have to do with the jungle?
I don't know. And then somebody thought better and went like, you know what? We should probably just call it something else.
That's interesting.
But yeah, no, it happens a lot. Like, it happens in a lot of big budget studio pictures. We just don't hear of it, and it's because it's not nearly as obvious as, you know, B movies. Like, thinking of House, not House MD, but like House, the horror series about different haunted houses.
Yeah.
The third, fourth, and fifth sequel are actually independent movies, independent horror, B-level horror movies. House 3 was actually had a completely different title, Revenge something or something like that, because it was about a jailman who starts haunting a house, and the title actually focused on the fact that the guy was a prisoner, an ex-killer who was executed, not the fact that he's haunting a house. But then when it was released widely, it was like, it's House 3.
That's bad.
And it's like, it's 2 or 3 sequels in a row that are like that. They're completely independent movies that actually had a small festival run as something else, and then when it came out on video, House 3, 4, and 5.
Why do that? Seriously.
I think it works though. I think people will rent it more. And in the defense of the House franchise, it is one of those things where it's like, well, I know what I'm getting. You know, I want a haunted house movie. It says House 3 on it. At least I know I'm getting a haunted house movie.
I guess.
In fairness.
Yeah.
Alright, so moving on with the spin-off sequel. Same universe, but a side character takes over the franchise. Sort of like Short Circuit 2 if the robot wasn't there. You know, where's Jeff Goldblum? No.
Well, I guess so, like Jurassic Park 2, where they just kept Jeff Goldblum and they just dumped everybody else.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Get Smart had the Bruce and Lloyd sequel.
Yeah, I'm sure that did great.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's what I want to see. The guy from Heroes and the guy from Mr. Sunshine having adventures together. No, not The Rock.
The Rock was not in good position for a sequel.
That's a good point.
But those sequels, those are good. If you like characters, I guess they'll work. If if you like the characters, if they choose some knuckleheads, as you know, let's make a movie about those. I don't think that would work great.
Yeah, it all depends on who you get to come back.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, what happens with these sequels, I think, is that the reason why they're on side characters is because the main actors are asking for too much money or whatever.
Okay.
So I'm guessing it's never going to be the character that you want.
Oh, wow.
Moving on. Well, got to talk about the trilogy.
Of course.
That's and for me, like, a third part of a trilogy is different than, you know, a second sequel. Like, that's the difference between Lord of the Rings: Return of the King and RoboCop 3. Where, you know, RoboCop 3 is just, here's a third story about that guy. Where Lord of the Rings: Return of the King actually concludes the story 16 times, but, you know, concludes the story.
Eventually, it concludes it.
Yeah. Or the way the Star Wars prequels and the original Star Wars trilogy, it's sort of like, when you put them all together, they sort of tell a full story. Neither of them quite make sense, but you know.
Yes. I like my trilogies. Each movies have at least a standalone story that is resolved. I don't like, at the first end of the first movie, like the actors just around me and, see you next time to see what happens. That's just bad. I want, at least have some completeness when I see each movies.
Mm-hmm.
I think the original Star Wars trilogy did that well. I mean, the first one, big spoilers here. The first one, the Death Star explodes. The second one, Luke loses his hand and Han Solo is captured, and at least they're safe and they're going to, they're setting up the third movie.
But isn't that kind of a to be continued? In fairness, like Empire Strikes Back actually ends with the good guys losing, going like, "Well, it's time for round 2, baby."
Yeah, well, the bad guys win instead of the good guys winning, so I'm fine with that though.
It is called Empire Strikes Back. It does do what it says on the tin, I suppose.
Exactly. And, the third one is also, concludes not only, a story and the whole trilogy as well. I guess the second one is a little weaker. It's not, it's not the good guys saying, "Oh, we dealt another blow," but, it still feels like, it's complete,
I'm just so tickled that you just said that Empire Strikes Back is a little bit weaker than the others, because that means we're going to get lots of comments.
I mean, you know what I meant. Weaker as in the complete story thing.
Yeah.
I hate you.
No, I agree. I hate the to be continued thing, and we're going to get to that in just a few. I think my problem with trilogies, the danger with them is that in trying to create a climax to the entire series, especially in action adventure series, there's always a danger of wanting to create a set piece, an action set piece that's too big for one movie to contain. Like I think that's what happened with Matrix 3.
Yeah.
Revolutions? Yeah, Matrix Revolutions.
Yeah.
Where, you know, the big Zion fight lasted forever.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work as a standalone movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like, all right, they're fighting, and okay, nothing else happens. I agree, that one, you know, they really failed. And I guess there's also the danger, if you're trying to do a trilogy and the second movie is horrible, are people going to go see the third one?
Yes, yeah, that's true. Well, to be continued movies are really a danger for that, where you have an incomplete story that the second half is going to be delivered later on. Well, sort of. Because Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest ends with the cliffhanger of Jack Sparrow being
Dead.
Dead, yeah, whatever.
Deadish.
Deadish. You've seen the commercials. I'm not spoiling anything. Come on.
Yeah.
And who's going to beat the Kraken?
Yeah.
Pirates of the Caribbean 3 at World's End resolves the question of how to deal with Jack Sparrow dying, but the Kraken just dies off screen between the two movies, and you're like, way to resolve your cliffhanger there.
Wow.
It was one of the most frustrating experiences ever, where it's like, the second one's like, how are we going to beat this crazy Kraken? We failed the first time. Oh, I'm going to see this in theaters. I sat in the theater seat and you go like, yeah, we killed it off screen. It wasn't really a big deal. Yeah. Freaking hell is that?
It did not digest Jack Sparrow very well.
But again, and the Matrix 2 and 3 are also one story when you think about it. Although, in fairness, actually, Matrix 2 is a full story. Then with like the beginning of the third movie tacked on to it.
Yeah. One series of movies that I thought was interesting was Back to the Future, because they complete the original Back to the Future story, like completely fine. All of a sudden, you know, Doc Brown happens and says, "Oh, we have to go to the future, help your children," and then it just, you know, to be continued.
Which was meant as a joke back in the time.
Really?
Yeah. When they had no plans of making a sequel when they did the first one.
Probably explains why they did the sequel 5 years later.
Yeah. No, it was totally meant as a joke, and they didn't expect the movie to have nearly as much success as it had, so then they felt compelled to do it.
Okay.
And then the second and third one are a good example of two movies actually filmed they were filmed back to back.
Yeah.
They were filmed as one movie, even though they deal with very different ideas.
Exactly. Different sets as well. I mean, one's a Western, one's a, you know, same as...
One's a Western if Disneyland, you know.
Western-ish setting.
True Grit is a Western. That was Disneyland.
All right.
But yeah, you bring in a good point about those two-parter movies, though, which is that, yeah, you run the risk of, you know, people not wanting to see it because it didn't do well in the box office. People didn't like it. And there's a lot of movies like that, like the Golden Compass.
Yeah.
It was actually a fine movie. I was actually fascinated. I sort of wanted to know what would happen next. And, well, I'm going to have to pick up the books, really, because the movie's not happening.
Apparently, you know, sometimes they have a series of book, you know, and they're sequels, and then they just quit in the middle, because after that, you know, well, the rest is not going to be that interesting. Like Narnia, for example. I think they're done with the movies. Yeah. And they did do all the books, but, you know, okay, that's it.
Yeah, well, they didn't even... That last movie didn't even do that book problem. Like, it skipped so many parts of it. Isn't it like...
That's true.
We got 7 swords to recuperate. And it's like, we're going to find 3 at a time. That's 3 swords, man.
That was lazy writing. Could have said we need to find 3 swords instead of 7.
Yeah.
But no, you know, we need to find the 7 swords. You know, don't fix the script or anything, you know. And yeah, they're not going anywhere with it anymore. And again, it's like, okay, well, where is it going now? And you know, the thing is really resolved in Narnia thing. And okay, read the books, kids.
Yeah, I think another great example of that is it wasn't to be continued movie at all, but Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. Like, the first one is actually an absolute delight. It's really sweet. If you're a parent and you have a daughter who's 10 years old and up all the way to 16, 17, it's absolutely lovely movie to make them see. Unless you're a father, because the fathers don't come off really well in those movies. Actually, no, if you are a father, you watch it with them. You'll look good in comparison. But then, and it's based on a series of book, the Anne Brashares books. And the second movie actually combines all the remaining books, of which I think there are 5.
Wow.
And it's so ridiculous because, every book is a different summer in the lives of these girls. And, they have all these events taking place in different countries in one summer. It's like, these girls are racking up the freaking flyer miles like crazy.
That's insane. Did they just think we're not going to get more sequels out of this, so let's just put everything together?
I'm trying to figure out why, because it's a viable franchise, because they don't cost a lot to make, because, it's social drama,
Yeah.
And the girls are old enough that they've reached that age where they can just play the same characters. Like, even though they're going to age faster than the characters, it's so standard for a 30-year-old to play a 19-year-old in Hollywood that you're not even going to notice,
Yeah.
I don't know what happened there. It's a viable franchise. People did want to go see it. I don't know what the hurry was. I really don't get it.
Maybe more books together, more money.
That's how it works. Getting back to the two-parter, though, like, the biggest frustration for me is that when you're making your audience pay $13 for a movie, tell a complete story. It's so frustrating to sit there and go like, to be continued. And I'm like, if I wanted serialization, I would watch a TV show.
Yes, I agree.
The experience is sort of like picking up a girl, getting drunk, going to her place, having some foreplay, and then her going like, I'll see you next week. I'll see you next year when the production is over from that, You're there standing with your erection going like, really? Oh, F you.
Yeah.
Well, no, not F you, because that's not what's happening. But,
Wow.
On that note,
Yeah.
if you have any questions,
Or you can leave any comments about sequels, what you think about them, and so forth.
absolutely. You may write us at mail@idiomanic.com or post a comment at idiomanic.com. We're also on Facebook. We're also on Twitter. We're also on iTunes. Please write us a review. It helps us a lot, believe it or not. And we'll talk to you next time.
Yeah. Terminator 2 put the action like the one notch above every other movie of that time, so it was great.
Yeah, I agree. Well, with the case of Terminator 2, it's actually because they're both James Cameron, Aliens, and Terminator 2.
Yeah.
And they both do the same thing, where Terminator 1 is actually more of a horror film when you stop and think about it. I mean, it's not classified as one ever, but if you look at the tropes, it's a silent killer monster that's out of this world that hunts this woman down all the way to the end until she finds a way to kill him.
That's true. That is true. I didn't think about it that way.
And when he made the sequel, he turned it into some real action science fiction tropes, which he did with Aliens as well.
What about you? Any sequels you're thinking?
Well, I'm with you. X2 was one of the ones in my list right away, and Terminator 2 is one of my favorite movies, so absolutely. The thing I've noticed, though, is like superhero movies, the sequel, like the first sequel, not the other ones, they're always the best one. And I think it's because they're, like you said, the characters are already introduced. You don't have to sort of tangle with the origin story.
Yeah.
Spider-Man is a great example of a movie that was bogged down by its origin story. In the sense of, you could have had a really great movie with just the origin story, but it would have been too quiet for a blockbuster. You need a flashy villain. Or it could have been a really good movie, just Spider-Man versus the Green Goblin, but you needed to introduce the character to the audience. So you sort of have two movies that don't really belong together, sort of meshed into one, sort of like a grindhouse movie. You know? It's like there's a missing reel in the Green Goblin story, definitely.
Yeah.
and because of that, the movie feels very disparate, and you're like, what's that?
That's true.
As opposed to Spider-Man 2, where, you don't have to, go through the motions of who Spider-Man is, and you can actually just go through, like, that's what's going on in Peter Parker's life, and here's the Dr. Octopus, and the two things tie together really neatly, and it's awesome.
That's true. Superman as well. Dark Knight.
Oh, yeah.
You're wow, superhero. You just banged the nail on the head there.
Ironically, by the time you reach the third sequel, though, it's always terrible.
Yes!
You forgot the first rule of remakes, Jill. Don't fuck with the original.
Hey everybody, welcome to Don't F with the Original.
With Nicholas, I'm the gaming correspondent for Idiomatic.
And I am Dimitri, editor-in-chief of Idiomatic and movie critic. And today we're talking sequels, the mechanics of sequels. Alright, let's get to the discussion proper. Can you think of an example of sequels that are better than the original?
Oh, I have a few I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
Aliens. I like better than the original one. They're two different genres. Aliens is more action, whereas Alien is more of a horror thing. But I liked Aliens a lot more. I'm not a huge fan of horror. I thought X2 was better than the original X-Men because the character's already established, like we mentioned, so you can go directly into the action, and the action was a lot better. Terminator 2, I enjoyed a lot more. The action was so much better than.
And I mean, I'm sort of making fun of the fellow panelists, but let's be honest. That's an opinion that the general public really has a lot of times.
Yeah.
You find it on the internet all the time. It's just a general opinion. And I feel there's something a little bit hypocritical about that. Because just because you're using the same characters doesn't mean you're not being creative.
Yeah. You can have a completely original story with, you're just reusing the characters. Whereas, you can have a completely different movies and it's just some recycled things. Oh, I've seen this before. I mean, I'm not saying this is a bad example, but like the Robin Hood movie that came out, and they recycled Saving Private Ryan in it for some, it was completely ridiculous. I mean, recycling ideas in other movies, and you think it's going to be original, but it's not. It's just crazy.
Oh yeah, Gladiator is the first act of Ben-Hur,
Yeah.
We're totally bagging on Russell Crowe here, but... And you can't tell me that, The Dark Knight has anything to do with Batman Begins. One is a progression of the other. Well, the second sequel, I should say, the third movie.
Yeah.
And again, I think you can see the reason why, though. In the case of superhero movies specifically, I'm getting off topic just a little bit, but in the case of superhero movies, the first one is bogged down by the origin. Then the second one gets it right, and everybody goes crazy for it. And unfortunately, that's when the producers start paying attention and going, oh, there's a large fan base for this. Okay, we need to please the fans. What do fans like? And unfortunately, the superhero movies are based on comics that have been around for between 50 and 30 years.
Yeah.
So you have these producers going through, oh, well, fans like this, fans like this, fans like that. Put it all in the next movie. And it's like 30 years of history. Yeah. And so every third movie has the same problem where it's just crammed with crap that just doesn't fit.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's made by producers instead of directors. And I always feel that there's a certain degree of hypocrisy. Unfortunately, the other guys aren't there because they would have said it. Whatever goes like, oh, I like it better when people present an original story. Why can't Hollywood be creative?